Good day and welcome to the channel. In this short video, we're going to explain how to set up secure LDAP against Azure Active Directory. For those of you who don't know, LDAP is just lightweight directory access protocol, and it's a way for mostly programs to query your credentials. So if you're trying to do single sign-on for things, it's really important. If you're trying to make sure that people just have one user account rather than having a different account for everything. Now, here's the backstory, and we'll just go over this very quickly. We have a client who has an on-prem Active Directory, and they do also have an Azure account. They have nothing much in it, no VMs, not much in the way of networking. It's pretty stripped. So we're going to assume you're the same and that you've got virtually nothing going on in Azure. And what we're going to do is show you how to set this up. Now, the big steps in this are to set up Azure Active Directory Domain Services, along with some DNS entries, and then to bind your network to that. And that requires some certificates and things to keep it all secure and some firewall changes. None of this is hard. There's just a lot of steps. So Microsoft fortunately has this really nice article you can skim through if you want, and it's really 4 articles. So we're going to start with the first article. So the first step is to set up the Azure Active Directory Domain Services. So let's, I've already signed into my Azure, and as you can see here, let's go into all resources. There's nothing here. It's stripped right down. All I have is basic Azure Active Directory and one resource group already created. If you don't have a resource group, don't worry about it. You can create it on the fly. Okay, so let's go back to home, and I'll show you an Azure Active Directory. I have very little. Let's go to users. There we go. Nothing here. Just garbage. And as it says here, sign into the Azure portal and then create resources, create domain services. So let's go do that. So what I'm going to do is, well, there's a bunch of ways to do it. I can click create a resource, which is what it suggests, and just type in domain services. Normally I just type it up at the top, but that's the way it's saying to do it. So we'll go the way that they've got it. Active Directory Domain Services, select it. It says to choose your subscription. So I'm a partner, so I'm using my partner one. If you don't have a resource group already, you can select create new. I've already got one, so I'm just going to select my UR Tech Resource Group 1. Now, the domain name is interesting. You have some choices here, but it boils down to the instructions tell you don't use anything that's on Microsoft.com because you need to buy a certificate, and you can't buy a certificate for on Microsoft.com because guess what? You don't own it. Microsoft does. So you have to use one of your own domains. So I'm going to use this domain, which is a car wash that a buddy of mine runs, and it's West Creek Auto Wash. So I'm going to add a new record, use an A record here, and I'm going to call my my prefix here AADDS, as in Azure Active Directory Domain Services. Doesn't make a difference what you call it. And just for fun, I'm going to point it to the same IP so that it resolves, so I can prove it works. So I'm just going to click save on that. There we go. Now, if I bring up a new browser and I go to AADS.West Creek. It's running out to UR Tech. That's right. I relocated it. All right. Not important. You get the point, though, that it does work. So there we go. Let's get rid of that. Now, you might ask why I did that rather than just go buy a domain. I could have bought a full domain. Could have bought a domain like AADDSWheeler.com or whatever I wanted. It doesn't make any difference. The reason is this. If I try to use West Creek Auto Wash here, it chokes because it's longer than 15 characters. Why is that an issue? Well, that's because of the old NetBIOS rules. So you need to have something that's shorter. AADDS dot works. There we go. See, that's happy? Make sense? All right. The region, whatever region you want. The SKU, this is how much you want to pay. Let's take a look at pricing here because it's a pretty big difference. So if you're using standard, it's 15 cents per hour. Enterprise is 40, and it's $1.60 for premium. And you can see what the differences are in here. But for testing, these kinds of loads that I'll be using this for, yeah, this is pretty tiny. 15 cents is just fine. The way I got to that was to choose how to choose a SKU. But anyway, I'm going to change that to standard. I want it to be as cheap as possible. And this resource is new. You want this to just be a user for us type. So let's click next. You can see here that the subnet is 10.0.0.0/24. Now that's just in mine. Yours is probably something different, like 10.2.0.0. It depends on what you already have. Now you need to know what that is, but that's about all. The only other thing you really need to look at here is the synchronization. It defaults to all. So I'm just going to click review and create, and then click create. So this is about 20 minutes in. You can see it's still running. All right, that took about 45 minutes and it's come up and said my resource is ready. So now I click on according to the instructions here. You wait for it and then you go to your resource. So let's do that. Click on go to resource. And you can see here that it says running. Now that's because I've actually been about an hour, and I know from doing this in the past that it may not actually be done when if you click on this immediately. So if it doesn't say running, just wait, it will get done. Now let's see what this problem is. Run the configuration diagnostics and run. DNS records, that's correct. So we were going to set that up next, but we might as well just click fix here and have it add them. So let's have it set up the internal DNS for us. Done. All right, now let's go back. The overview. Oh, go to resource. There we go. Health is running. It's not doesn't say deploying, so that's happy. And as per the instructions, we have now done this step because we clicked fix. So it set it up for us already. That's the internal DNS. Okay, now you can read through this and it says basically if you've already set something up and you kill it, when you go back to it, it's not going to work. You need to go through this whole process again. That's what that warning is. And what it's telling you here is that for security reasons, it doesn't store the hash of the user's password. So the only way for you to get this to work is to have everybody change their password, or whatever accounts you want to LDAP to change their password. So in our case, we have a user that we have called, well, let's just go off to it here, let's go to home here. We'll go to Azure Active Directory, and we have this lovely user named user1. Oh, we don't have user1. It's from a different lab I was working on. So if you have a user that is already in your Azure Active Directory and you want them to be used for LDAP purposes, well, they're going to need to change their password. So it's telling you how to do that, which is just go to myapps.microsoft.com and sign in and change your password. It's pretty straightforward. Now, in our case, let's go back and look at what we've got. I don't have any users yet, so I'm just going to make this easy. And let's go to home. I'll bring that up in a new tab, and I'm just going to create a new user. But if you've already got users, no problem. If you want them to be useful for Azure Active Directory LDAP, you need to have them change their password, which you could do naturally, just let it sit over time, or you could force them to do it. Whatever works for you. So I'm going to go to users here. And as you can see here, I only have 2 users and they're garbage users. Also, I don't have them set up the new domain yet, and I need to do that. So I'm going to go back to home. I'm going to go back to Azure Active Directory, I should say, and then go down to custom domains. And I'm going to add in my new domain. Add custom domain. Bingo. Add domain. And to prove I own it, I need text record with that entry in it. So let's go do that. I'm going to go back to my Cloudflare and I will add a record. And this is a text record. I'll enter at and that content. There it is. And it's up and live now. Here and select verify. And bingo, it's validated. So we're good. In your case, if you already have existing users, you can just have them change their password. Or you can either let them expire and they'll change them themselves, or you can force them to change them. It doesn't make any difference. But in my case, I'm going to create a new user because I don't have any existing users. Create new user, and I'm going to call this person user1. Clever name, huh? But I don't want it to be this default garbage domain. I want it to be my at West Creek Auto Wash domain. Isn't that nice? User, first name is user, and the last name is 1. And I'm going to set a garbage password. And now I've got a user. Now, because that user, well, it's a couple of things. One, you'll see the user actually hasn't shown up yet. So let's click on this to refresh it. And I've found it takes a few minutes for a new user to actually show up. And bingo, there's the user. Now, I need to sign in as this user because the password that I've set is forced to be changed on its first use. So I'm going to have to sign in as this user. So I'm going to bring up a new in private session and I'm going to surf off to myapps.microsoft.com. It really does make a difference where you go. You can go to any of the Microsoft stuff, portal.office.com, whatever works. It's just going to force you to change. So in this case, it's user one, autowash.com. Next, password there. So that's the old password entered. Enter my new. And in addition to changing that password, it also sets up anything else that's required. In my case, for this domain, I did already set up a requirement to have two-factor authentication. And if you don't set it up, things may not work. So I'm just going to get through this now. So just ignore this for most people. So I'm signed in with that user in this in private session, which really just did two things. One, it forced me to change my password because I was a new user. You probably don't have to do that in your case. It also had me set up my two-factor authentication, which you probably don't have to do either. But what it also did, which you do have to do, is have it changed so that it creates new hashes. And so that's what the purpose of that was. And let's go back to the instructions, which say to get on to the next step, which is the Azure Virtual Network. And what that's, you can read the whole top of this, and it's basically what it says is you should run a different virtual network for your virtual machines than for the virtual domain. So how do you do that? Well, it says there's two ways to do it, peering and virtual subnet. We're just going to create a virtual network subnet. It's the easiest and it's the one that they recommend. And then we need to find the resource group in question, which just happens to be right here. But if you weren't sure where yours were, you could type in resource. Oops. And there it is. And then select the Azure Active Directory Domain Services Virtual Network right there. Just click on that. Then select address space on the left. And here is the default subnet we have. We have to add an additional subnet that does not overlap this subnet. So I'm going to do something crazy like 10.0.1.0/24. That's a whole 256 IPs, which is certainly enough for this lab. You could use a larger subnet if you wanted, but that's what I will use. And you can see it does not overlap with the previous one here. Click Save. And now in the left side, select Subnets and add subnet. And here we need to add the subnet we just popped in. So you need to call it something. The article suggests calling it workloads. I don't have a better name, so I'll call it workloads. And you can see it selected that IP range already, which is happy. And the defaults here are all happy. Click Save, and it will add it. Bingo. And now it makes a very important point. So now you've gone through here, and when you create a virtual machine that needs to use the managed domain, make sure you select it within that virtual subnet. Do not use IPs for VMs in that subnet for directory services. Use the subnet you just created. And we can scroll past virtual network peering because that was an option. Now, you won't need to do this part. Create a server or any machine really, because you probably don't care. But because I am only doing this virtually, I do need to do it. So I'm going to skip through this very quickly so you don't have to sit here and get old. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go create a VM and I'm going to do it inside that subnet that we just created. Here is the part where it's easy to get it wrong. It defaults to the wrong subnet. I need to change it to workloads. And I could right here select log into Azure Active Directory directly, but I'm going to go about it a different way so we can all learn something. So while we're waiting, let's go back and get to step 3, which was configure LDAP for Azure Active Directory. And this is all about creating a certificate. Now you can just use a public certificate. However, this is just a test for me, so I'm going to follow what it's doing, which is a self-signed cert. And it's not very hard to do, so let's just go do it. And it says here, basically, there's a lot of different ways to do this, but we're just going to use a command line. So you just copy paste this and off you go. So I'm going to do that quickly again so that you don't get bored. And there it is. So let's go to the resource and let's connect to it. RDP. That's odd. What did I do wrong? Let's click OK. So let's look at networking. Oh, well, that's a problem. There's no inbound rule. So I have to add in the port rules, which is not very hard to do. And you probably don't have to do this. It's probably already working for you. In my case, I'm going to go back and off to my resource group. Actually, let's just go home, off my resource group. Security group, create. Again, you don't have to do this, I'm sure. NSG1, create, almost done, done. Go to resource and inbound security rules on the left, and I need to add 3389 here. So I click add, and we just want to use RDP. Everything else here is good. Select add. And it's going to tell us it's just a really bad idea to have 3389 open on the internet, but yeah, we're going to do it anyway. And let's go look at the machine now. And connect. And let's see if it works. Downloads. Bingo. Sign in with the local user account created earlier. And now I just want to bring up a PowerShell, in this case, terminal. And get back to our instructions. So you probably didn't have to do any of that, but I did because I didn't have a machine to even work on. So let's continue. So now I've got to copy these commands. Put in whatever your domain is. And let's create a certificate. Bingo. And now we have to export it. And where are the commands? We have to export it twice, and we have to then import it into, well, any machine that wants to use it. So let's do the management console. Right, so let's go do the usual thing here, which is, if you know anything about certificates, you bring up an MMC, and you go to File, Add, Remove, Snap In, Certificates, Add, Computer Account. Yes, I'm going quickly for a reason. And Finish, and OK. And there it is. Then down to Personal, and there's the cert that we were looking for. Now we have to export it. So let's find out what the details are in the instructions for that. So the first time we have to export it as a PFX. So right-click, All Tasks, Export, Next. And this one, we do want to export the private key with it. So let's click Next. And here we do not need to have Enable Certificate Privacy. I don't think it's actually a problem to be on, but we're not requiring it. At least not according to the instructions. And I'm going to set a password just because. Now, where do we want to export it to? I'm going to export it to the desktop, and this is a PFX. Cert. Save, and it should show up right there. There it is. Yay. We have to do that again, but with a different kind of export. So we export, next. No, do not include the private key with this one. And let's go off. This we need a CER. We need a base64 X509 cert. This is all in the instructions, by the way, in case you think I'm going through this too quickly. So we're right here now. Down to step 5. Next, file name. And let's call this the same thing. AADDS cert, except I won't call it PFX. I'll priv key. Not that it makes a difference what you call it. Save, it should show up right there as soon as I click next and finish, and bingo, it's there. Now you might ask why we needed to go through that export process. Well, that's because you need this certificate for any computer that's trying to connect. So if you weren't using a self-signed certificate, you wouldn't have to go through this process, but because we're using self-signed, you have to. So this certificate needs to be installed on any computer that you want to connect. And to install it, you just right-click on it. In my case, Windows 11, select install certificate. Now it's already here, so there's no point. But just to show you the process, we'll do it again. So install certificate, local machine, next, automatically select, finish, and it's just going to put it back in the same place, which is this one right here. And we have to get this PFX file. And by the way, I really dislike not having file extensions on. So while I know this is going to annoy a few of you, it's going to take a second, I'm going to turn it on. I just can't handle not having file extensions on. I also like having hidden files on. There we go. So I know what the heck I'm dealing with. Anyway, there it is. We have to copy that to, in my case, my local computer. It just needs to be accessible. So I'm going to go into here and paste it. There it is. And why? Well, because we need to put it on the Azure Active Directory Domain Services. So we're now down to here. So we go off to the Azure portal, go back to home, go into Azure Active Directory Domain Services, select the domain in question, select Secure LDAP. Well, I see before we do this that I've got a little problem to deal with. So let's go here, select yes, select run. And what did we miss? Oh, a network group. Okay, so let's let it fix it. Good. And let's go back. There we go. No error in it, error message anymore. Let's go to Secure LDAP and select Enable. And yes, I'll let people do this over the internet because that's kind of the point of this. Unless you're just doing it from your on-prem service, unless you're just doing an LDAP from there, or known servers, known data centers, things like that, then you may not want to do this. But I want to make it available over the internet. So let's click on that. Let's add the PFX, the big password I set on it, and save. And this will take, a few minutes, so I'll be back. Bingo, it succeeded. Now it says if you do want to have people get access to it, you've got to allow port 636 through your firewall. Okay, that makes sense. And let's go back to the instructions and the tutorial. So yeah, again, you should set this up for, you should go through and set this firewall rule up. I'm not going to, because I'm just going to run it through my local machine for the moment. So let's go off to that local machine, which is a machine that's in Azure. And let's do what it says, which is to bring up LDAP. Now, LDAP is a little utility that comes with the users and computers snap in. So what we're going to have to do is add that in. If we go and try to bring up LDAP right now, which is just LDP, little utility, it's going to tell us it can't find it. Yeah, there you go. Right, so that's garbage. So what we have to do is right-click and go to Apps and Features, and go back to Apps, and click on Optional Features, and it's an optional feature, so we click View Features, type in RSAT, Remote Server Administration Tool, and this is the one we're looking for, Active Directory Domain Services. Now this is just if you want to run the test, so if you're happy that it's working, don't bother to do this. Or you can just copy the ldap.ldp.exe from any other computer, it's just a standalone executable. But in this case, I don't have it, so I've got to follow the instructions and get this added. So this is going to take a second, I'll be right back. All right, now I'm going to close that, and let's bring up LDAP. So let's go to a terminal window, and you type in LDP. You can type in the whole thing if you want, ldp.exe. Launches a little utility. Click Connection and Connect first. And in my case, I'm putting in aads.westcreekautowash.com, port 636 with SSL. Click OK, and bingo, look at that. Now we want to bind this together, so click Connection and Bind, and it's bind with credentials, password. Okay, so after a couple of typos, I finally got it fixed. So yay, done. The binding is done, the connection's done. Okay, so let's close that because it's garbage. And just for the heck of it, let's join this computer to the domain. So I'm just going to go to Settings, and down to About, and Domain or Workgroup. And I'm going to change. I'm going to join this to that domain. Yay. What use? Bingo. Added. Okay. Close. Restart. And I'm up. Let's just take a look, see if it did join or not. And as you can see here, it's joined. Yay! Now, joining a computer to the domain was not necessary to prove LDAP is working, but it does show you that everything's connecting nicely. There it is, connection, connect, done, connection, bind. Authenticated, yay, and now let's do a search. And run. There you go, bunch of information just spit out. So I think that's proved it's working. Hee-haw! Hey, if you found this video useful, please give us the big thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, you can always get a hold of us at www.urtech.ca, or you can leave a question or comment below, and if we don't get back to you, somebody else will. As you know, it's YouTube, everybody has an opinion. Thanks, and have a great day. Bye-bye.